Hello my friends, this is Cindy Dell. This is the final video on the My First Sweater series. And the last thing that we are going to do is block it. So as I've mentioned a lot before, it's important to make sure that your finishing techniques are well done so that your final garment or piece that you've knitted looks handmade, not homemade. So this is going to be an episode on how to block, and blocking is very important, and you'll see why. So there are some tools that you need. One of them is a blocking mat, or a towel works. A towel doesn't work as well as a foam blocking mat, but it isn't essential that you have this type of blocking mat. You need a tape measure. A straight one, a hard one is a good idea to have. You need blocking pins, and I have a couple different kinds. These are T-pins. You want to make sure that when you purchase these, they are rust free or rust resistant, because you don't want rust forming on your pins and then getting onto your garment. I also have some of these, which I use a lot. They're not as accurate as these T-pins, but they are helpful. They come in a size small, like with 4 tines, and larger with 8 tines. They're very sharp. Keep them out of the reach of children and pets and even your own fingers. Okay, I'm going to put these aside for right now. And get my little sweater that I've done for you. It's kind of a mess because it's not been finished. And we can imagine that the finishing has been done. I'm going to show a couple different ways to do that collar. So I have soaked my sweater. I've actually soaked this sweater in just water for overnight, but it's fine to just soak it in water for an hour, half an hour to an hour. So on your pattern, you're going to have some measurements. So if your pattern says your sweater is, your sweater is 48 inches in circumference, you're going to want to measure 24 inches across. And this is just a little mini. You're going to have like several mats. You're going to want to measure. And mine says, I'm going to pretend that mine says it's 20 inches across. So as you look here, I'm only at 9.5 inches. So I'm going to just spread this out a little bit, the body of it, and measure again. And now I have 10 inches. So I know that's where I want it to be. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put in some pins. And what I like to do, I'm going to move this in again a little bit so that you can see. It's a really good idea to go in between the stitches and flat. You don't necessarily do that, especially on edges. Go flat like that. And that just kind of keeps it. I'm not going to do the ribbing yet. I'll come over here and do this side. I am going to measure one more time to make sure I'm still at 10. Yeah, it looks good. I'm still at 10. Now I'm going to show you how to use these, and it's kind of the same way. Try not to split the stitches, like you don't want to go down into a stitch. Oh, I'll make this a little bit higher. You don't want to split your yarn. You want to try to go in between the stitches. And with something like this, you can see why the pins are a little better than this. And then just stick them in flat. That works. Now I'm going to do the yoke. You would do the sleeves the same way. You would measure the sleeves, make sure that they're there's half the circumference of the sleeve, and you can see that on any schematic and any pattern. A good pattern will have that. So you're going to, measure the sleeve, extend the sleeve down into another mat. I like to keep the stitches so that they're about even here on the top. You don't have to do too much pinning because these are straight edges. And you're just sort of doing the circumference, half the circumference, like that. Okay. Then you've got your sweater blocked. What I like to do with the yoke is just kind of smooth it out so that it's not puckering here. So you don't want it to pucker. And before blocking, this is often the case. If you just flatten it out, kind of smooth it nice, that works really well. Now for the ribbing, it's a little different. You want your ribbing, you don't want to stretch out your ribbing. You want to kind of scrunch it together like this. And I don't pin it, I just leave it. Kind of make sure that the edges are straight. You want to, measure it so that it's the length that you want, usually from the center. You can also take a straight edge like a ruler and just make sure that these are even. And I can see I need to move this down just a little bit here. Oops, sorry, you're not in frame. Okay. You can see here that I'm not exactly even, so I need to scrunch this down a little bit so that it's even across. Okay, when I've got that, I just continue scrunching, making sure that this pulls in. This is a little different up here. You can do the same, but it's a double thickness. Remember, we sewed this down, so it's a double thickness. But again, you want to still kind of scrunch it up. Like that, and that's all there is to blocking that. I'm going to go in here, and some of you have a turtleneck. And these are the stitch markers that we used last time to mark where our stitches were, where we were going to sew. So I'm going to take those out. Yep. And I'm also going to take out the stitching. It's not very elegant, but usually these just pull out. There we go. And then we're going to make a turtleneck. This has been kind of worked with a lot, and so you can see some of the stitches are uneven in here. That's laddering. We talked a little bit about how to avoid that. My problem is that I use too big of needles, for the weight of the yarn. So with this worsted weight yarn, I should have used, like a size 7 or 8, maybe even a 6. Blocking won't help that laddering, so the best thing to do is prevent it. But here you can see I am scrunching this up together so that it stays like that. And then when you put it on, it'll stretch. And you've got a stretchy cast on up here. Then every time you wash your sweater, you just kind of do the same thing. You're not going to need to put all the pins in that you did before. You can if you want to. But you're basically just going to scrunch your sweater back into shape. Now, it takes sometimes 24 hours for your sweater to dry. I like to leave it overnight, come back in the morning and flip it over. And then most of your sweater is going to be, pretty well blocked. And you want to measure again. Make sure this is a little bit off, so I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. Let me see. Go. So you can see. It's a little bit off. It's not quite 10 inches over here, so I'll stretch it just a tiny bit to make it 10. You can make these edges straight and this edge straight here too. A wooden ruler is awesome for this. It works really great, but you can see my edge is pretty straight. This is pretty straight down on here. You don't want your ribbing to be straight like that. You want it to go in. Okay, same with here. Scrunch everything in. I pat it and just make sure there's no puckering here. Continue to kind of move these stitches in, and that's all there is to blocking. What I've done with my sweater, there's a couple of things you can do after you soak it. I put mine in the spin cycle in the washing machine. It's a 13-minute just spinning. It doesn't agitate it, and I've really never had any problems. Some people are worried about that, but that's what I do. The other thing you can do is take a towel or two for a big sweater and kind of wring out the sweater a little bit, not too much because you don't want it to distort. Wrap it up in the towels and step on it for, 2 to 3, 5 minutes. And it gets most of the water out and it's ready, and either one works just fine. Okay, so that's how you block.